right, everyone. So, I had only a few submissions so far for the bouncing ball project, but I wanted to go over those submissions so that A, I could give the students who have them done a review and they get a chance to resubmit the project with those changes done. And B, it also helps everyone else to see maybe where common issues occur. And so I have these projects downloaded and I have brought them into After Effects. And so we're going to look at a couple things first and then get to reviewing. The first thing I like to look at is when you bring an asset or like a video or something into After Effects here, you'll notice that there is like information up at the top bar in the project panel. If I have a panel selected, like if you come here and you click on panels and you notice that it's highlighted, mine's blue, could be a different color for you, but either way it is like a highlighted panel, and you hit the tilde key on your keyboard, which is up in the upper left hand corner, usually under the escape, but it's that little squiggle line. If you hit that on your keyboard, you will see that it just it takes that panel that you're in and it maximizes it to your screen size, and then if you hit it again when that panel is selected, it will minimize it down. So this is a really good um, like resource to use whether you're looking in here at assets and trying to figure out information on that asset, or if you're like here down in your timeline and you have a lot of layers and you're sick of scrolling and you kind of want to just look overall, select that layer and then hit the tilde key again to go back to your main view of the software. um, a great option to use that. So I use the tilde key quite often, actually, when I'm working in After Effects. I'm not quite sure if I think it does work in um, Premiere Pro as well, possibly Adobe Audition. Um, any Adobe software that has panels like this that are set up. I don't know if it works like in Illustrator Illustrator or Photoshop, but that might be something we can check out later. So if I maximize this project panel here and I can see the information about the projects that were brought in here, the first thing that I like to look at is the frame rate of the video, which is at 24 frames a second. That's perfect because that is what I wanted you all to create your project at. So I will be able to see if your frame rates are inconsistent or off on your projects here when I bring them into After Effects. I can also see the time of the projects here, the video size, which is your aspect ratio, right? We usually work in 1920 by 1080. We don't really do 4K or much below that. So when your projects, when you submit them and it says, part of the points are having the correct aspect ratio and the correct frame rate, that is how I will check them. So unfortunately, you can't get away with that information. Um, but let's go ahead here. All three of the students that have submitted so far have correct frame rate and correct aspect ratio. Let's go ahead and review these projects. So if you want to kind of change the size of your project panel, if you just hover your mouse in between that project panel and the other one, you can click here and drag, and that will resize that for you. So I don't need that information anymore, so I want to expand my scene um, or composition panel a little bit more there so we can get a good look at what's going on. Oh, here's something that's interesting. I didn't realize my caps lock was on. Can be an issue. It's always been an issue in After Effects, but say you open your project and you're not seeing anything in your composition window, and it gives you this little red bar here at the bottom that says your caps lock is on. Basically, you have to shut that off. If your caps lock is on for some reason, it will not work. It does that for videos if you're trying to play them inside of After Effects, or even if you have something going on your timeline. And frequently I'll accidentally hit that caps lock button and that will cause an issue. So just, when you see that little red bar there, make sure you read it before you close it out and check your caps lock button so it's not on. So here we have, I think this is Colette's. Let me see. I have Jasmine's. I have Colette's video, and then I think I have, who else do I have on here? Let me just go click that. Emma. So Emma DeBose, Colette Donner, and then Jasmine Romero. So I'm looking at Colette's right now. Let's go ahead and play this. The nice thing about playing these in After Effects is that I can stop it one frame at a time if needed. All right, Colette, really good start on this project. I'm going to kind of break things down with each of the bouncing balls at a time. So let's start with your the overall look of this. I like the text introduction on here. It looks really good. The timing of it is good. It looks like they've got it on for a couple seconds there. I like that it's got like a nice fade. The thing I would do here is I would maybe the 2 seconds is good. Let's see, it's like takes the full 2 seconds before the balls show up on screen. So what I would do here is maybe speed up the process for when each one of these words pop up on screen and not have the fading out of the text happening at the same time. Because what I notice here is that as soon as ball pops up on screen and then the word bounce pops up on screen, they're already fading off. So I would have the word pop up on screen probably for the first 12 frames to maybe the first second, and then leave it up for about 12 frames here. And then from the 1 second, 12 frames to the 2 seconds, I would do that full fade out. So the fade out will only happen for 12 frames total, and it'll be up here fully ready for like 1 full second. That is probably what I would do. So again, let me repeat that for you. Um, have the word show up on screen between 0 frames and 12 frames, fully up on screen, both words ball bounce, and then have it fully opaque. You don't want the opacity to change at all for 1 full second. So between 12 frames and 1 second and 12 frames, keep that um, fully opaque, and then from 1 second, 12 frames to 2 seconds is where I would do that fade out animation. That way, you want to make sure that we're going to talk about text in typography in the next assignment, but the biggest the biggest thing when you're animating text and typography is leaving it on screen long enough for someone to be able to read it. And we'll do a little bit of overlap with the different animations. Like on here, you're overlapping, like revealing and kind of changing the transparency at the same time. We don't really want to put it on and take it off at the same time, so um, that's what I would fix first. As far as like the composition of the balls on screen here, I would maybe just kind of nudge everything over and give it a little space. I know right now you're trying to match up like the size of the three-dimensional ball and the 2D ball that you did in After Effects and the 2D ball that you hand drew. But we want to just have a little bit of space here in between this 3D ball bouncing and the one that you did in After Effects. Just the floor area is kind of close together. I'm aware that this right here between the actual balls is where you're trying to determine the distance, and that's understandable. There's kind of like, there is a difference between a visual distance and an actual distance, right? You can measure something for an actual distance, but sometimes that negative space in there, you want to make sure that there's like a visual distance right there as well. So it might look okay here. You could just kind of spread them all out a little bit, or even just scale down the composition where your 3D ball is in. As far as the actual color palette goes, I really like this kind of pastel-y green and pink that you have going on here. I would, maybe you could update the floor on the 3D one to be also that kind of pastel-y green instead of that pastel pink color. I think that that would kind of tie that 3D ball in a little bit more with the rest of the composition. And how you can do that, right, is let's say, let me create a composition here. I'm just going to leave it as comp 1. I'm going to draw a rectangle. Am I going to draw a rectangle? Yes, I am. And you've got the color here. What's really nice about some of the recent updates in After Effects is there's like a properties panel now for your objects where you can easily access your color in a couple different spaces. So you can access it here, your fill color, or even your stroke color in this properties panel. You can also access it up at the top in the toolbar. But I'm going to just double click that fill color right there, and you'll see over on the right hand side of your color picker, like the color picker panel, you're going to see a couple different options here. The HSB is your first option. That's hue, saturation, and brightness. Now, I don't really, most people don't really use that option that I know of. You can if you're comfortable using hue, saturation, and brightness. That's really good if you're trying to build contrast within your scene. Um, but but normally what I'll do is I will actually use the physical color picker and I'll drag my cursor over a color that I want, and then here you see the color bar option, and you can drag that up or down to change the actual hue. Notice that it's also changing the values here on the side under the HSB and the RGB, right? RGB, of course, stands for red, green, and blue. Primary colors when you're coloring physically on things are going to be yellow, red, and blue, but in the digital format, it is colors are mixed differently than what you would do in real life. So colors are mixed by RGB, red, green, and blue, and so you can control the amount of, let's say, red in here, or I can change the amount of green, which is also going to change my hue, pushing it more into like the oranges and yellows. And then, of course, if I change my blue, if I like add more blue or subtract more blue into here, it's going to bring it into like those violet tones. So you can also use those if you're looking for a specific one. Or right here where there's this hashtag, right? That is your hex colors. Hex colors are going to be your best friend when it comes to digital artwork, especially working in animation or across different softwares, right? Because as long as your softwares are using the same color codecs that your computer's working in, you should get exact colors. So let's say this is actually a pretty close color palette to your muted pink, almost like a mauve color that you're using. And so I would just click on this and select and highlight that hex number right there, which is that value. And then you can go into Blender, and when you go to change the color, in that you can also enter the hex value into there. So I would just copy it from After Effects from the green. I know you were actually using that green color. Copy that, go into Blender, go to that platform color, and just paste it in there. And it'll change it to a very similar. They might not be perfectly matched up, but they'll be very similar enough to make it a little bit more cohesive in your composition. Um, I love the little hearts that you added on to the hand drawn ball. I think that's really cool. I've actually never seen anyone do. Everyone does a lot of um, lines, like motion lines and stuff, but I enjoy the little hearts. I think that's unique to your style. So I say keep it. The ball looks really good. As far as the 2D hand-drawn ball, let me go ahead and play this back to back. What's nice is when you're also viewing a video here inside of After Effects. Like I said, you can go frame by frame at a time. But here, you're in your footage in like the whole scene panel. There's a difference between your composition panel and your or I should say tab, right? Because we're in the scene panel and there's the composition tab and then the footage tab. You can click on these and move back and forth. In the footage tab is where you're going to do things like rotoscoping or viewing videos or looking at images. Like if you double click them from your project panel over here and view it, it's going to go into like a footage tab, right? Let's say you're wanting to work on it with animation, doing things on the timeline, you're going to want to select over to that composition tab. But while in this footage tab, you have kind of your separate timeline right here. Mine happens to be pink because that's the color of the asset like layer or whatever inside your project panel. Um, Yours will be different. But this, you've got a little playhead here that you can scrub back and forth on this timeline to play through the video, right? And so I can, if you notice, if I just play it randomly, it automatically loops the video. So it plays over and over. If I want to change that selection, I can move my playhead to any point and I can click this. There's like an in set your in and out point. I think that if I play it back, it should loop back to that point. It might loop back to the beginning. Let me see. No, it does loop back to that point, which is nice because now I can cut out the section of text because I'm not looking specifically at that. As far as the looping goes on this video, it looks really good right here. At the very end, I think there's a missing keyframe. Just very subtle right there is one single frame that's missing. This happens a lot with people's first time doing projects and stuff. And when there's a frame missing on your timeline, what'll happen is that object disappears, right? And so you just want to make sure that um, you go into your timeline and you maybe extend your composition a little bit. How can we do that? We can, if we select our timeline down here at the bottom panel and you hit Control K, that will bring up your composition settings. And so you can change your composition settings at any point. A lot of the times you'll do that when it comes to increasing the duration of the composition. When you want to decrease the duration, you can actually do that directly in the timeline, but you'll want to maybe increase it only by like maybe 1 or 2 frames so that you can drag um, that asset, that layer that is in your timeline, you can drag that little bar over and increase the time on that so that it doesn't just disappear for 1 frame. Like I said, you're only going to have to do 1 or 2 frames of that. And then if we're still playing here, let me see. So the hand-drawn ball looks good. I would just do that is increase that layers time by 1 frame at the end. Let's look at your After Effects bounce. I like the blur that you've added onto, the motion blur that you've added onto it. Looks really good. Squash and stretch looks good. It doesn't happen um, too early. Like the squashing is happening when the ball actually hits the ground. And a lot of times what students will do is they'll begin the squash before the ball hits the ground, and that, inherently doesn't make any sense, right? If you were to bounce a ball, it wouldn't deform in the air like as a squash until it hits an object. But the stretching looks good because it stretches all the way down until it does make that impact with the floor, and then it squashes. I wouldn't make any changes actually to your After Effects ball. It looks really good. Nice and smooth animation. The timing's really good on all 3 of them. Usually we have that squashing issue, and we do right here. So on the 3D ball as well, is where I was discussing about how the squashing occurs before it makes impact with an object. and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. We want that squash to occur. We want the stretching on the ball to happen all the way down till there, and that's when you want that squash to hit. It's very hard to see when you're watching it in full speed, right? But when I break it down one frame at a time, I can see that squashing occur right there. One initial frame. If you can adjust that, you can just go into your timeline inside of Blender and you just select that keyframe and drag it on your timeline over to the right hand side, and that will increase. Actually, yes, no, with the when you're changing your Y value, right? Because that's what you're animating there. You're going to take that beginning keyframe of when that Y value happens and just nudge it over one frame to the right. And that should adjust the timing of that squashing. But that looks, other than that, it looks really good. And then the squashing when on the rebound of the bounce, so the ball hits the ground and then it starts to bounce back up. That's perfect. That looks great because right as the ball deforms on the way up, it's going to build into that squash. Or it's going to, I'm sorry, build into that stretch and out of that squashing. And then hitting that top where it slows down in velocity, it's hitting the top of the bounce and going back to the original shape. And then it goes back down and it stretches. It looks really good. Yeah. So, essentially, just minimal edits to here. I would even maybe just draw floor as well on the hand-drawn animated one. All you have to do is add one layer into your Adobe Animate in the timeline there. Just one entire layer that lasts the entire video and one line. That way you're not having to repeat frames or anything. You'll just extend that frame all the way to the end. And so it'll be one single frame. You don't have to draw it over and over and over again. It'll stay consistent and the same shape. But really, really good start on this, Colette. I think that you're heading in the right direction. Looks good. All right, so now I'm going to hop on to, I believe, Emma, correct? Let me see here. Yes, Emma. Let's go ahead and play yours. Nice. Yeah, that's kind of Colette. If you're watching, that's what I'm discussing right here. Emma's pops up on screen, stays completely opaque until right. It actually, yeah, the 1 second, 12 frames, and then fades off by 2 seconds. Or so in that 12 frames, you do the fade. Let's go ahead and watch this here. Nice start on this, Emma. I would change the background color here. It's kind of like a muted brownish violet color. I think to have it fit in a little bit more with the entire composition, you could do either a really, really deep blue, very deep green, or opposite end of that, right? Like a light, very, very light in desaturated color green or a desaturated color blue. For instance, I would probably take this shape here. Let me drag your composition right into here so I can see my shape. And then I can also see your video here. Also, cool thing that they've added into After Effects with some updates recently is that when you render your video, you don't see this information, right? Because you don't have like timelines and stuff when you're playing it. But if you bring that video into After Effects and you bring it onto your timeline, you drag it onto your timeline, you can see any kind of like timing marks or notes that someone has placed in there on their layer, right? So that's kind of really cool. Or if they were to have placed it on their timeline up here, with markers, you can see all that. It's really neat. So I would probably change the, let's see, probably a lighter colors that I would go with. I brought the color picker up here for that box. I'm going to select my um, eyedropper there, select a color green, maybe something like that, maybe even lighter than that. So I'll double click here and then maybe adjust this a little bit more. Bring it up and into the right a little bit, or I'm sorry, to the left part of the screen, and then you have like a super light green to put in there, or if there's already a lot of green, we can double click this and drag this part right up into this blue, and then have a nice light blue background here. I think that would overall make the composition a little bit more cohesive. And as far as we're looking like overall with this bounce, let me click back into my scene here and drag this playhead, trim the timeline there a little bit, and replay it. Overall, like the spacing looks really good on this. I would increase the size of the hand-drawn ball to kind of match the sizes of these ones. Doesn't have to be perfect, right? Because when we're doing the hand-drawn stuff, we don't have these other things for reference in there at that point. Um, but I would just, you can do that by selecting the layer on your timeline where you have the ball bouncing, like that composition or that pre-comp. Select that pre-comp and just hit S on your keyboard for scale and just increase that scale like that, right? Making sure that your anchor point is centered in your object. I think that if I think it's control clicking. Yeah, if you can control and click the pan behind tool or your anchor point tool up in the toolbar, it will automatically center your anchor point into the middle of that object. So, cool little tips and tricks here for you guys. I recorded those videos about a year ago because we do these same projects in the beginning of class, which I'm going to tie these into a different project later. We're going to be doing something really cool called a Rube Goldberg machine, and I'm just building the lesson out right now for you guys. But this bouncing and like learning velocity and squashing, stretching, like working with your principles of animation is going to help develop like a cooler project for that. So uh, this information is good to store, right? This is going to be valuable for a lot of things, you know, the basis of animation. So just increase the size of that to match these a little bit more. As far as like the bounce goes of that hand-drawn ball, it's beautiful. You do a really good job with these motion lines. The ball itself is really consistent overall as far as shape. It doesn't really deform out of the ordinary or change size consistency throughout the animation. You've done a really good job, and then you did a really good job also changing the, like when you bring it in and you have to right click on the layer. My mind is blanking, but interpreting the footage and changing the frame rate there to match. Looks beautiful. None of the you're not missing any frames, right? Because none of the balls have any moment in time in your animation where they just disappear. So really good job on like the timing of that. Let's look at the After Effects ball right here. You're very, very close. I love the squashing and stretching that's going on. If I come here and grab the playhead and we move frame by frame, the ball does start to stretch a little bit early there. As far as the After Effects one goes, not the 3D one looks good. You did a good job on that one. The After Effects one starts to squash a little early there. That could also have to do with the easing of the keyframes that you did. So if you just want to maybe, if you go into your, let me show you how to do that. Let's move this um, rectangle. I'm going to go here to the beginning of my timeline with my playhead, I'm going to add a keyframe under position there, and then I'm going to go to the end of my timeline and I'm going to drag that box over, right? Selecting both of those keyframes, I'm going to hit F9 to ease them, and then we're going to hop into our graph editor over here. I'm going to increase this a little bit so you guys can see. Bring this section. Let's see, how do I do this? Why is this? There we go. Can drag that over. I want to see this a little bit more. Let me go to the speed graph here. And if I were to select this first keyframe and kind of move it over here, right, we have, you can see actually, if I increase this a little bit, when you see your path of animation in your composition, what I mean by that is this little box here is your beginning start point of where that object is. This little box over here is your endpoint. So those are actually your visualizations of like your keyframes, the beginning and the end keyframe on your object. And you see all these tiny little dots in between, right? You see this one here. Let me close this so we can see these a little bit better. Maybe shut off the transparency behind here. Perfect. A little bit easier to see, right? You see along your animation path, there's these little tick marks or like little dots, right, that are along there. That is your in-betweens that are being created, that are automatically being created by the software. You don't have to manually draw those in like you do inside of a hand-drawn software like Adobe Animate, right? You have to manually draw your in-betweens. What's nice is that After Effects does that for you. Now, if you notice on that animation path that those little tick marks in the beginning are very, very close to each other, and then as this object reaches peak speed over in this area, they start to spread apart. Those in-betweens have more distance. And that is showing, that's really showing the speed of the actual animation along the path. When things are closer together, when those the in-betweens have less distance in between them. I know, a lot of the same terminology happening. But when there's less distance in between each one of those little keyframes, then the animation is slower, right? Because each change is happening very, very slowly. But when you have increased distance in between those little keyframes or hash marks on your animation path, that's when the speed increases, right? And so we can see that changing live when we select the object here. Let me see if I can find, why can I not find this? Let me scroll out of here. Select here, select the actual position right there, and it'll show that in your graph. As I select this and manually change it, the timing right here, the influence of the, here, let me go this way. I've pushed the influence of this initial keyframe all the way to the right, and so it can no longer do that. But as I change, let's say I bring that over here all the way to the left, you can see that those in-betweens, the distance between them changes, right? So you can see the timing of your animation changing live here, which is really cool. It's very important later on when we start to do more complex animations to be able to check and look at that. So what you can do in relation to this, right, and the actual squashing and stretching happening on the Adobe After Effects ball, the one in the center, you can check how these in-betweens look, those little keyframes on your animation path. You can check those and you can see where it's really starting to deform, and you can just grab that keyframe on your graph inside of your timeline and just adjust that little line here. You're going to want to use the speed graph. I think that's going to work a little bit better for you. I know that we separated dimensions on that too, so if it's a little bit easier to do it in your value graph, you can go to the value graph and make those changes as well. But it'll be very minimal. Now, when we're looking at these bouncing and we see the velocity, right? Um, I think there's a slight issue with the timing of the bounce. Like I think that overall the motion of the ball from top to bottom when it's at the peak of the bounce and then when it hits the floor, um, the velocity is incorrect, right? When you bounce a ball on the floor, it is going to speed up. The ball will accelerate to the ground. It's going to hit the ground. It's going to stop that acceleration, and it's going to make the ball move in the opposite direction. So it's going to go really fast towards the ground. It's going to hit it, and then as the ball is coming back up into the air, that ball is going to slow down until it reaches the peak height, and then it's going to increase back down, right, as it falls. Think of gravity and how gravity works. And like if you were to jump in the air, how that works, right? As you jump up, you're going to kind of slow down in the peak of that jump, and then as you go back down to the ground, the gravity is going to pull you down and you're going to go faster. So making sure that as the ball comes down, it's going to reach its peak speed until it hits that floor, and then that peak speed stops, the ball goes back up into the air and it slows into that position. So you're going to want to check your easing on the keyframes of the actual bounce, like minus the squash and stretch, right? So when you're, I don't know if you could just maybe cut and copy and paste that so that you don't lose all that easing on the squashing and stretching or all that information that you've put in, because what you guys should be doing as you're animating, you want to animate in stages, right? You kind of build upon things like you would any project. So you want to make sure that you get that velocity correct first, and once that velocity is correct, then you're going to add the squashing and stretching to the object. If I go, let's see, let's rewatch this a little bit. It could, um, yeah, because right now it's moving at the same speed over and over and over again here. So you want to make sure that those keyframes are eased. As far as the animation of the 3D ball goes, it is speeding up to the ground. Let's see, it looks like your velocity is correct here. Fast, 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 hits the ground, bounces up, and yeah, the velocity is good on here. Maybe you could adjust the easing a hair on that so that there's not quite, it's kind of, it comes to that stop up at the top really quickly. So maybe you ease into the speed, like the slowing down, you increase the distance of the keyframes. I'm trying to think of like how your graph is looking. I'm trying to visualize it in my head, or how your keyframes are looking inside of your timeline in Blender, right? So you're gonna have your two keyframes of the actual bounce, right, or the three, however many it is, and you're gonna have the graph, the curve that's gonna be changed a little bit differently. Um, as the ball, maybe you just want to, so it looks like I'm thinking in my mind, right? Your curve is probably coming up to a really steep point and then going down, like having a steep drop down. Think of like a skateboard, like dropping in a skate park. Um, Maybe smoothing out the angle of the drop a little bit more, so it's not so sharp coming down. I think that would maybe help the speed when the ball comes up to the top, because you kind of want to slow it down a little bit more so it reaches that top, and it's not like it's kind of fast and then it hits the top and just kind of stops. It just makes the animation, I'm not saying that your velocity is incorrect, but it can just use a little bit of finessing on your keyframes and the easing to make it look a little bit more realistic, right? Other than that, this is a fantastic start. You've done a really good job. Um, Really, in the scheme of things, right? I know I go on about this stuff, but it's very minimal changes that you have to make. It's more just like finessing of things and adjusting, to to make it, oh, let me cancel this. I was just in here. To make it look, to make your animation overall look more polished, right? So, really good start on that. We are going to hop over to Jasmine's. Jasmine, um, I've had before in a class, so welcome back, Jasmine. Let's go ahead and look at yours. All right, good start here. Let's go to the beginning. The initial thing that I see that, like overall in the composition, um, color palette looks nice and consistent. Maybe adding a little bit more contrast in between the green because the background is really dark. The green is also very dark. It's like a forest green. So either I would probably just lighten the background a hair. I think that's going to be the quickest and easiest change that you can make because if not, what you have to do is you have to go into After Effects and you have to change the like lightness of the floor that you have on the After Effects ball, and then also having to jump into Blender and changing the lightness on the floor, like your platform for that one too. It's going to take longer. You're going to have to re-render your 3D ball. So fastest, quickest solution would be to go in and just adjust the background in After Effects. So I would just, like I said, bring that down a bit in saturation so that we get a little bit more contrast happening here. When we look in the beginning here with the text, you are also going to want to do what I was suggesting with Colette's piece. The text isn't on screen long enough at all. You won't. If I look here at the timeline and I move my playhead over, your text is only on screen for a total of um, 13 frames, which is just way too fast, right? That's not even a full second of animation inside of After Effects. Our full second is 24. So you like a half a second where the text is on there. I can read it. Obviously, it's like big enough, but like we want to give our viewers time to like look at it and read it. It's just way too fast. So I want you to do what I mentioned in Colette's review and have the text appear on screen between 0 and 12 frames. Have it stay on screen between 12 frames and 1 second 12 frames, so a full total of a second. And then between the 1 second 12 frames and the 2 seconds is when you want to fade that off. The other thing that I noticed is your floor for the After Effects ball is still on screen when your text is on screen. You don't want that. So you're just going to go into your timeline and just trim that layer of the floor to start or to show up once the balls show up on screen. Here's the other thing, right? You're going to have to go into your timeline because once that text fades off screen, there's, let's see, 6 frames before like your hand drawn ball and the After Effects ball show up, and then the 3D ball isn't even on screen until the next frame. So they don't they don't generate on screen at the same time. Um, so what you're going to want to do is at that 2 seconds once you fade off the text is when you want to fade on the all three of the balls, right? So what you could do is take the composition or the pre-comp where all three of those balls are in your timeline, select all three of those and pre-comp those again into their own composition, and then do that opacity change on that layer, on that pre-comp layer. And that way it'll change them all at the same time, right? Because pre-composing is essentially just taking, um, like if I had a bunch of papers on my desk, I take those papers, I put it into a binder, and in that binder there's like separate tabs, right? So I put those papers into one of those tabs. I put that tab maybe into a folder. I put that folder into the binder. I put that binder into like, I don't know, on a bookshelf, right? So that's essentially what pre-composing is. It's just like organizing your layers, and it's taking them and allowing you to kind of collect them together and do something with that collection. I kind of want you guys to think about that. So, you're having issues doing that. You don't want to add a bunch of time or keyframes on each I'm sorry. I need a little bit of water. My mouth is getting dry, but you don't want to add keyframes on each one of those layers. Select those layers, pre-compose it, and then add one set of keyframes. Quick kind of workaround for that. Let's go ahead and look at the actual animation of the balls. I'm going to start it right here when they're all on screen. As far as the look of them go, really good as far as regarding like spacing, size, they all look really nice. Let me just redo this. This looks really good. The hand-drawn ball in like particular looks really nice. You have very like even lines, like motion lines happening on there. You maybe want to add in a little bit more stretching. Let's see here, because the ball starts at like the ball in the top of the bounce is at the original size, and as it goes down and it increases velocity towards the floor is when you want that stretch to happen, and the ball kind of overall stays consistent size. So if you want to go in there and just deform that ball a little bit, the stretch or the squashing looks really nice. When you hit the ground here, the squashing looks great. But you want to kind of do the opposite as the ball goes down to the ground. And then as it bounces back up, you want to make sure you add more of that stretch in. So just going in and deforming that ball a little bit. Also keeping in mind to keep the overall mass of the ball the same, right? So as like if we were to take some kind of ball that's very malleable or squishy and we were to look at it as it's like original and then you pull it out, it's not going to change in mass, but the length is going to get longer. Um, Even if it starts to get skinnier, it's going to get longer in one spot, right? Because you're not like taking away from it. It's the same weight, same size overall. It's just deforming that mass. So adding a little bit more stretch into that. That's the only thing I would do, and then maybe adding a floor as well if you guys want to, so that it looks more consistent over here overall with like the 3D and the After Effects ball. If we look at the After Effects ball, it looks really good. I think that you need to add motion blur onto it. So just turning that on the layer. As I play it, there's kind of that same issue on like Emma's 3D ball, right? The ball is hitting, it's coming up a little bit too fast. And so, like, again, it's going to be quick in the beginning, but once it hits that peak height, as it's like coming into that peak height, it's slowing down quite a bit faster than that. So you're going to want to slow it down, start slowing that down. Probably like if I go frame by frame, hits there, slowing that down like right about here. Right halfway through, you want to just adjust that curve because right here is kind of where, here's where the issue is. This is why I love After Effects pulling a video in here, is we can go frame by frame. Notice how you have stretching on this ball, but no squash kind of happening into that like peak height. So you want to have like this, not like the amount of squash that you would see as the ball hits the ground. You want it to go from that stretch and slowly go back into the like original shape, right? So maybe just easing a little bit more between that stretch keyframe into the original size. So maybe you just have to adjust like the distance of those two keyframes on your timeline. And I think that would look a little bit better. Your squashing starts to happen there right before it hits. So you want to also make sure that the squashing happens when it hits the ground and not right like kind of, because right here it's almost more of the original size. So you want to make sure stretching, 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 stretching until it hits the ground. And that's when it's going to deform. Stretching, stretching, going back up into the original. It looks like on that one then is maybe you don't need to redo anything, but just finesse the easing a little bit on that. And then adding that motion blur. And then if we look at the 3D ball, you have the 3D ball I think is going to need the most work. There's no squashing and stretching happening on there. And there's also no, like the velocity is incorrect on that one as well. It's actually opposite, right? It's kind of it's slowing down as it goes to the ground, and then it's speeding up as it like hits the peak of the bounce, and it needs to be opposite of that. So as the ball again comes down to the ground, it's going to increase in velocity. It's going to hit the floor, and then it's going to slow. That velocity is going to slow down as it goes up into the air to that peak bounce because of gravity, right? It's going to slow it down. So I would just maybe re-watch that section of the lesson and update that one a little bit more. As far as like the lighting that goes on it and the color and the platform and stuff, you're pretty good on there. So yeah, some work a little bit more on that 3D ball, but overall, um, you guys have done a good job. Good start on this project. If anyone else turns in their projects, I suggest everyone watch this video so that you are also aware. A lot of students make the same mistakes right away um, in their first projects. So until we start to move on to projects where you guys have a little bit more freedom with creativity and stuff, a lot of, like I said, students will have similar errors. So watching this video is going to be important for everyone so that you guys can look at your work, make those adjustments, and then submit the assignment. Also, I've only got a couple participation questions in. Those are due on the 15th, so I'd like to see some more because there's several of you guys in class. So, quite a handful of you guys actually that I need those participation questions from. Again, they're counted as attendance and they cannot be made up or turned in late. So just making sure you guys do that. Other than that, I hope you guys have a good day, and I will talk to you guys in the next lesson.